There comes a kind of silence in life after a certain age. Not the silence of a quiet room, not the silence before sleep. It's a different kind. A social silence, the kind where you realize, slowly, that the people you once called friends have become something harder to name. Not strangers, not quite, but not the same either. You still have their number saved in your phone. You might still write a short message on their birthday. You might still think about them sometimes. On an evening like this, when the light outside is fading and the house feels a little too still. But somewhere along the way, without any argument, without any real ending, the friendship simply thinned, like ice at the edge of spring. Still there, but you wouldn't trust your weight on it anymore. If you're somewhere past 50, you may already know what I'm talking about. You may have noticed it quietly, without quite putting words to it. This is about that feeling. About why friendship changes after a certain point in life, and why that change, as painful as it can be, is perhaps one of the most honest things that ever happens to us. Most people expect loneliness to come with old age. The image is familiar. A very old person, alone in a house, waiting for a phone call that doesn't come. But that's not when it starts. For many people, the real unraveling of friendship happens much earlier, in the 50s. Sometimes even the mid-40s, long before anyone is considered elderly. Long before people allow themselves to feel entitled to say they're lonely. It often begins so quietly that you almost miss it. A friend moves, for work or for love, or simply because life took them somewhere else. Another couple has children who need more of everything. Someone goes through a divorce, and the shared social world you once inhabited together shifts and splinters like old wood. Someone changes careers and becomes consumed by it. Someone withdraws into something private, illness or grief, or just a kind of exhaustion that has no name. And you perhaps do some of these things too. You get busy, or tired, or quietly overwhelmed by your own life. The calls that used to happen every week become monthly, then occasional, then something you keep meaning to make but don't. No one means for it to happen. That's what makes it so strange. There was no falling out, no betrayal, no moment you could point to and say, that's when things changed. It just did. And you find yourself in your 50s, looking around at the people in your life and realizing that the depth you once had with certain people has quietly receded, like a tide going out, gradual, natural, and somehow more disorienting than you expected. I want to tell you about two men. Let's call them Antti and Marcus. They met in their 20s, working at the same company in a small Finnish city. They weren't immediately close. It took a few months, a few late nights at work, a few long drives home in winter darkness. But once the friendship formed, it was solid. The kind of friendship you don't have to think about maintaining. It simply existed, like weather. They were both at each other's weddings. They saw each other's children born. They called each other on bad days. They made plans, canceled them, rescheduled them, kept them, forgot about them, made new ones. The friendship survived 2 decades, more or less intact. Small misunderstandings, differences in money and status that neither of them talked about. The natural drift that comes when families pull people in different directions. By their mid-50s, they still considered each other close friends. But something had changed that neither of them could quite name. When they met for coffee, which was now twice a year at most, they talked the same as before. Old stories, work, children, small complaints about the body getting older. It was comfortable, easy in the way that old furniture is easy. But on the drive home afterward, Auntie would sometimes feel a quiet confusion. He had laughed, he had enjoyed himself, but he also felt, somehow, that they hadn't quite reached each other, that the conversation had stayed on the surface, that there were whole rooms in his life, his doubts, his loneliness, his sense of something missing that he hadn't opened. And he suspected Marcus felt the same. But neither of them brought it up, because friendship at this age, Auntie had learned, has a kind of unspoken protocol. You don't say, "I feel like we're losing each other." You don't say, "I'm lonelier than I thought I'd be by now." You don't ask those questions. You drink your coffee. You talk about the old times. You say, "We should do this more often." And then another 6 months pass. There's a reason friendship becomes more difficult after 50, and it has less to do with busyness than we usually admit. When we're young, friendship almost forms itself. You're thrown together in school, in university, in early workplaces, with people your age, at the same uncertain stage of life. You share confusion, ambition, fear. You are, in some important way, all making it up together. Friendship in those years can be forged in a few weeks, sometimes a single night. But after 50, the conditions that once made friendship easy have largely disappeared. You're not thrown together anymore. You live more separately, separate routines, separate concerns. The overlap in daily life that once made closeness natural has been replaced by calendars, commitments, distances. More than that, you've changed, and so have the people you once knew. The man you were close to at 30 has been shaped by 20 more years of life. He's made choices, had losses, developed quietly into someone who carries more history, more guardedness. And so have you. There is something in that accumulation, all those years of compromise and disappointment and quiet adaptation. That makes a person harder to fully know, not in a bad way, just in a real way. The openness of youth isn't quite available anymore. Not because people become cold, but because they become more careful. After enough years, most people learn without intending to manage their inner world privately, to not burden others, to present a version of themselves that is functional and pleasant and doesn't require too much of the other person. This is not deception. It's protection, mutual, unspoken protection, a kindness of a sort. But it does make depth harder to reach. I want to say something now about the particular way this happens for women, because it is different. Britta is 61 years old. She has lived in the same town in Sweden her entire adult life. She has 4 people she considers close friends. She has known them for 30 years or more. But when she sits quietly with herself, in the early morning, before the house wakes up, she sometimes feels that only one of them really knows her, the real her, the one who worries and doubts and feels sometimes completely alone, even in the company of people who love her. The others, she loves them. She does. But their friendships have become shaped over the years by what they share rather than who they are. Children, husbands, neighborhood gossip, shared history. That can be enough sometimes. That can even be beautiful. But Britta sometimes misses the version of friendship she had in her 20s. Those long, unguarded evenings. That feeling of being known all the way through. She doesn't talk about this because she doesn't want to seem ungrateful. And because she suspects her friends would be hurt if they knew, she sometimes felt this distance between them. So she carries it quietly, as many people do. Here is something that took me a long time to understand. Friendship doesn't only fade because of distance or busyness. It fades because of something more subtle. It fades when the version of yourself that a friendship was built on is no longer quite who you are. Think about it. Some of your oldest friendships were formed around a shared moment in time, a job you both had, a neighborhood you both lived in, a phase of life you were both navigating. You were defined in part by that context, and so was the friendship. When the context disappears, the friendship sometimes cannot carry the full weight of who you've become. It tries. You both try. But there's a slight awkwardness underneath it sometimes, a reaching back toward an older version of yourselves that feels a little like putting on clothes that almost fit but not quite. This isn't anyone's failure. It's just the nature of time. People grow in different directions, and friendship, real friendship, the kind that holds your full self, requires that your growth somehow continues to overlap with another person's. That's rarer and rarer as you get older. Not impossible, but rarer. There's another grief tucked inside this one. Not only do old friendships thin, new ones become genuinely harder to build. There's a particular pain in meeting someone after 50, someone you like, someone you could imagine being close to, and feeling the awkwardness of attempting depth with someone who already has a full life, full history, full set of relationships. At 30, you could meet someone and within a year have them at the center of your world. At 55, you meet someone wonderful at a book club or a neighbor's gathering, and there's a real warmth there. But getting from that warmth to something you could call close friendship takes an enormous amount of sustained effort and mutual willingness that life at this stage doesn't always allow. The time is tighter, the energy is more precious, and there's a subtle guard that comes with age, a kind of emotional conservation that makes the complete openness of new friendship feel risky in ways it didn't before. You've been hurt by now. You've had people leave. You've invested in people who eventually drifted. And some part of you, without quite deciding to, learns to be a little more careful with your full self. So the new friendship stays warm but slightly shallow, and you accept it, because something warm is something, but it's not the same as being truly known. Let me say something carefully here. I'm not telling you any of this to make you feel worse, and I'm not building towards some neat answer, some set of habits that will fix the problem. Because I don't think it's really a problem. Not entirely. The thinning of friendship after 50 is part of a larger truth about life. A truth about how we change and how the world changes around us, and how some things that we assumed were permanent turn out to be more seasonal than we knew. There is a loss in that, a real one that deserves to be acknowledged quietly, without drama, because many people feel it and have no idea that it's nearly universal. They feel it and think, something is wrong with me. Why am I so lonely when I have so many people who care about me? Why does it feel like no one really knows me anymore? But that's not a personal failure. That's just what it feels like to be alive at this particular stage of life. And there is perhaps something worth noticing in the discomfort itself. The longing for real closeness, the ache of it, tells you something important about yourself. It tells you that you still want to be known, still want to connect, still carry that need. And that, for what it's worth, is not nothing. That's a form of aliveness. Auntie still calls Marcus twice a year, sometimes 3 times. And in between calls, he sometimes thinks about him, not with sadness exactly, with something more like fondness for a particular season of his life that is still somehow alive in this other man. They will probably never have the closeness they once had. Life has taken them too far in different directions. But when they talk, there is something genuine there. Something that can't quite be replicated. The shorthand of shared history. The ease of someone who knew you before you became the person you are now. That has its own kind of value. Different from depth, but real. And Britta still has her friends, still gathers with them, still laughs, still finds comfort in their familiar company. She has also, quietly, started going to an evening course at the library. Nothing dramatic. A course on old Nordic literature. She doesn't know yet whether any of the people she meets there will become anything more than acquaintances. But she has decided to be a little less careful, a little more open than habit tells her to be. Not with enormous hope or effort, just a small, deliberate choosing to remain a little available to whatever comes. Friendship at this age asks something different of us. It asks us to let go of the expectation that closeness should feel like it did at 30. That's not the standard anymore. It asks us to find value in smaller, quieter expressions of connection. A phone call that doesn't last long but leaves you feeling seen. A coffee with someone who makes you laugh without having to explain anything. A conversation that doesn't go deep but goes somewhere real. It asks us to grieve without dwelling the friendships that faded, to allow them to be what they were, to let them mean something, even ended. And, perhaps hardest of all, it asks us to stay willing, to resist the part of the self that wants to close down, to not let the accumulation of years and disappointments turn into a kind of permanent guardedness, to stay just barely available, even when it feels risky, even when you're not sure it will amount to anything. There's no guarantee. That's the honest truth. Some people make beautiful new friendships in their 60s and 70s. Some people find that one old friendship deepens unexpectedly. Some people learn to be content with less and discover that less can be enough. And some people carry a quiet loneliness for many years, not dramatically, just quietly, a low note under the music of daily life. That's real too, and it deserves to be named. The rain is softer now. Or maybe it's just that you've stopped listening so hard for answers and started simply listening to the sound of the house around you, to the quiet, to the presence, even in absence, of the people who have mattered. There was a woman who once said to her daughter, late in her life, that what she missed most wasn't the talking, it was the sitting. Just sitting with someone the way you can only sit with a person you really know, without needing to fill the space, without performing anything. just being alongside someone. That kind of presence is rare, and if you've had it, even once, even briefly, even a long time ago, then you know exactly what she meant. And if you're still hoping to have it again someday, that's not foolishness. That's just the heart, still reaching, still alive to what it needs, still quietly hoping. If this quiet moment resonated with you, you are always welcome here. This channel was created for slow reflections, honest emotions, and the thoughts many people carry silently through life. If you'd like more stories like this, you can gently subscribe and return whenever you need a peaceful place to think, feel, or simply listen. Thank you for spending this moment here tonight. Take care of yourself and rest well.